Blessings, Divine Reflection. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Idalis. I'm a healer, a psychic intuitive, purveyor of the stars. And on this channel, I love to talk about esoteric topics, occult wisdom, and give you practical tools to help you along your spiritual journey. So if that's something that interests you, consider hitting subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss a video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the magic of the 7 African powers. I'm so excited for this video. It's felt like such a long time coming. I have been personally walking a spiritual path toward my ancestors, of which are African descendants. So I'm so honored that I get to share the knowledge that I've gained, and I hope you're just as excited to discover your path to the Orishas or Lwa. If you're ready to rediscover traditional African beliefs and, learn more about each of the individual African powers, as well as the history behind the birthing of these spirits and where they've come from, then keep on watching. So we're going to dive into the individual mythology behind each of the 7 African powers, which are the main gods and goddesses worshipped throughout the African religious traditions. But I wanted to give a brief introduction of African religion to those wondering. So the study of each of the 7 African powers will vary depending on which branch of study under Yoruba you are studying under. So Yoruba is a group of people and a culture that stems from the countries along the West African border and was proliferated during the Atlantic slave trade. So with the transport of African bodies to the Western world, the Americas, Cuba, and the Caribbean, it is said that these spirits of West Africa, these Orishas, the Lwa, these gods and goddesses, these ancestors, traveled with the African peoples through that journey, and to return to their energy is to return to the self, okay? So under the main umbrella of Yoruba, there's Ifa, which is studied mainly in West Africa and also in the Americas. There is Santeria, which is studied in Latin America and Cuba, and they call the African powers Orishas. And in Ifa, they call the African powers Lwa. And then under Yoruba, there is also Vodou or Voodoo, which is practiced in Haiti, but is also practiced in the Caribbean. It's also practiced in Latin America, and West African Vodou is also very famously practiced in the South, here in North America, very famously in New Orleans. There are also cross practitioners of Catholicism and Christianity, because during, the slave trade, Yoruban culture was mixed with Catholicism and with Christianity. And to continue their practice, African peoples would mix energies of the saints with their own spirits. And you'll see this crossover more commonly in Lukumi or Santeria. So there are hundreds, if not thousands, right, of Orisha or Lwa that embody the element of earth and take precedence over the earthly dominion and the heavenly bodies. These 7 African powers are just the most commonly called upon gods and goddesses. If you are looking to develop a deeper connection with traditional African beliefs, then you may find a soul tie to one of the 7 African powers that I'm going to dive into later in the video. It is said that you have an Orisha that was assigned to you before your birth. It's called your head Orisha. The word Ori actually means head. So as I, go through the 7 African powers, really feel into their energies and see which one resonates with you in your body, in your mind, in your heart, in your soul, right? You may have certain characteristics of the the Orisha that rules your head, and connecting with that Orisha is a great way to get started along your journey to working with cultural practice. And then, of course, if you want to deepen your study even further, cultural traditions that stem under Yoruba, Santeria, Ifa, Vodou, they're community-based religions. You know, eventually you could even become an initiate, right? You can become initiated into these religions. But of course, it's more than okay to start your practice and start your study individually and on your own. Also, I want to mention that the Lwa, the Orishas, they are literally spiritual beings at their highest form, you know? So their energies have molded to shift depending on the land that they are in, right? Depending on the time period in history and depending on each individual person. I also want to mention that you shouldn't let anyone tell you the right way to practice. And that's just something I really wanted to share and felt guided to share. So, okay, last disclaimer, because I feel like African religion is so polarizing, right? I do want to mention that if you were born in a Western culture, it's more than likely that you've been indoctrinated to believe that African religion is dark or evil. And yes, there is darkness and evil in all religions, okay? There is going to be a darkness. There's always a polarity. There's also a really beautiful, deep wealth of spiritual knowledge and spiritual wisdom and just connection and heritage and history, right? The mythology behind these Orisha and these ancestors who were physical beings on earth, right? And have ascended to the realm of the invisibles. It's such a profound connection to have. So, yeah, I just wanted to preface saying that. With all of that being said, I know it's probably so much information. With all of that being said, let's get into the 7 African powers. Okay, so the 7 African powers are Papa Legba, Oggun, Oshun, Shango, Yemaya, and Oya, of course. The first African power that we're going to get into is Papa Legba or Ilegwa or Eshu. I'm going to give you the birth story of each of the Orishas and some of the correspondences that are associated with the deities, as well as some offerings you can leave them at an altar space. So Papa Legba, which I personally like to call him, is the ruler of the crossroads, okay? So the realm between the living and the dead, but also literally any intersecting street is where you can go to leave offerings for him. Papa Legba also rules over fate and the choices that we make in life. There is a famous proverb associated with him which says, Eshu punishes you today for that which you will do tomorrow, right? So there's also kind of an element of karma associated with him. He's also associated with the Oriental principle of yin and yang. Papa Legba also translates the messages of the other Orishas. It is through Eshu that we hear messages and can transmit the messages of the Orishas. He is also, though, a trickster, so be careful what you ask of Papa Legba and be careful what you wish for, because Papa Legba likes to play games. So yeah, Papa Legba's most common version or depiction is that of an old man with a cane, maybe a cigar and a hat, sitting at a crossroads. But he also takes on the form as well of that of a little girl, as well as a boisterous little boy. There are hundreds of forms that Papa Legba can take on, but those are some of the more common ones. Now let's get into the correspondences. So Papa Legba is associated with the colors red and black, and his alekes, which are spiritual beads, which look like this or like this. You can also wear spiritual beads in his honor, and his spiritual beads will be red and black. Some numbers associated with Papa Legba are 1, 3, 21, and 101. Also, offerings to Papa Legba, as I said, can be given at a crossroads, and the best way to connect with Papa Legba is on Mondays, which is the day of the week that he presides over, but this may vary depending on the culture under Yoruba that you study. And Papa Legba also can be contacted at midnight, which is commonly understood as when the veil between the spiritual world and the material world is the thinnest. Papa Legba is associated with this symbol as well, and offerings to Papa Legba include cigars, rum, hard candy. Papa Legba also likes, money. Papa Legba likes palm oil and also black coffee. And Papa always eats first, so if you're leaving offerings to the other Orishas, make sure you feed Papa first. That is what's most traditional. And also, offerings can be given to a cement cone with cowrie shells for a face. And you would put Papa Legba at the entrance to a door, because doors are also representative of one realm to another. And if you are familiar with the Tree of Life, there is a voodoo Tree of Life in which all of the Orishas and Lwa sit, and Papa Legba sits at the 6th Sephiroth on the Tree of Life called Tifereth. Okay, next up we have Obatala, who is the Orisha of the white cloth. Obatala is androgynous and depicted as both male and female, also has many different forms that he takes on and has many different names, some of which include Baba Arugbo, which means old master, and Aluo Aye, which means Lord of the Earth. Obatala represents compassion and mercy, wisdom, as well as fair judgment. Obatala represents the ancient, the sage, and the mystic. He is also known for creating the human body. So that's amazing. It's said that Obatala actually was drunk on the day of creating the human body, which is why people are born with handicaps. So if you are someone who was born with a handicap, Obatala might be your patron saint. Obatala is associated with the color white and can be seen in the snow that adorns mountaintops. He can be seen in the clouds. And offerings to Obatala are foods that are white. So coconut, rice, milk, absolutely no palm wine is drunk during ceremonies with Obatala. Offerings to Obatala also include white bread, as well as a number of various animal sacrifices, which I will not be naming in this video because I don't feel like most people have access to live animals or want to be sacrificing animals. I mean, it is traditional and I don't want to be hypocritical. Obviously, I respect and honor that tradition. I think most people who would criticize that are probably people who eat meat but wouldn't actually kill an animal themselves and eat it, you know what I mean? But if that is something you want to partake in, then I would encourage you to do your own research in that arena, and to do so obviously respectfully and with consciousness and with love and reverence and respect for that animal. Also, offerings to Obatala are given on a white cloth. He is associated with the 4th Sephiroth on the Tree of Life called Chesed, and is associated with this Veve, and his day of worship is on Sunday. Okay, next up we have Oggun. Now, Oggun is the warrior. He is aggressive and action-oriented. He also is the god of iron and metalwork. Now, where Oggun is the warrior, Obatala is the soldier. And soldiers act based on command and have a strong set of values, right? But Oggun, he does not have a side that he fights on. He is willing to fight both sides and destroys all that gets in his way. He's not a mercenary, and his loyalty cannot be bought. Now, the power of Oggun can only be matched up against another male. Otherwise, his power becomes abusive, murderous, and one of pillage and destruction. Oggun also has a hand in political power and civil authority. He is associated with the colors green and black. Offerings to Oggun include iron, as well as rum and black beans. Animal offerings are given. Only male animals can be sacrificed to Oggun. Oggun famously cleared the path for the other Orishas to enter Earth with his axe and his dog. Another famous story associated with Oggun is that he got so powerful that he killed his subjects who refused to obey him, and then ultimately killed himself with his own axe, which is obviously, you know, some sort of hidden message about power and control and the shadow side of male aggression. Oggun is represented by this Veve, as well as Gebura, which is the 5th Sephiroth on the Tree of Life, and his day of worship is Tuesday, day of Mars. Oggun is too much. Alright, next up we have Yemaya, who is probably one of the most popular Orishas. She is the goddess of the 7 seas and rules over the upper level of the ocean as opposed to the deep ocean, and also rules over ocean storms and sorcery. Yemaya is often depicted as a mermaid. Yemaya represents a vast might and a bountiful beauty. Yemaya also represents the archetype of the mother, tender and forgiving, fertile, and also has a protective force. Yemaya is worshipped on Saturday, is associated with this Veve, and as well the Sephiroth number 9, which is Yesod. Colors that represent Yemaya are blue and white. Offerings to Yemaya are blue foods, and you can also wear blue clothing in her honor, and then of course the alekes that you wear for her are blue. Yemaya likes onions and white corn, as well as anything that has come from the ocean, so oceanic stones and shells as well. Yemaya likes porcelain, white jars, and pitchers as well. And animals sacrificed to Yemaya are often thrown into the river. Now, the birth story of Yemaya is as follows. The story of Yemaya is not commonly known or talked about, and by the end of it, you'll know why. So, in order to rebel against his father, Yemaya's son, Orungan, defiles her. And before he can commit the act again, Yemaya throws herself from a mountaintop. And as Yemaya dies, 14 Orishas emerge from her body, and as her water breaks, the 7 seas pour out from her womb, and she creates the world's oceans. Upon reading this story, I had such a visceral experience of my emotions in my body, and I couldn't help but break down in tears. It just felt real. It felt like something I remembered. The pain that humans feel on Earth is a reflection of that first pain, right? That singular pain, like as above, so below. So it's just such an intense emotion, you know, which the element of water oftentimes brings out of us. So next time you're looking out into the ocean, I'm so sorry. You'll know that story, and maybe have a deeper reverence with the ocean. I'm not sure. But that's the story. Let's move on. So next up we have Oshun. Oshun is the goddess of love and sensuality. Oshun also represents wisdom and abundance. She is also the goddess of rivers, fresh water, and streams. Oshun, though, also represents human emotions such as vanity, spite, and jealousy. Oshun's day of worship is on Friday and is associated with the number 5. Oshun likes sunflowers, honey, cinnamon, as well as oranges and pumpkins. Offerings to Oshun can be given at rivers and waterfalls and fresh waters. Her colors are yellow, gold, and sometimes coral, and is represented by this symbol here. So the birth story of Oshun is actually quite fascinating. Oshun was the first and only of the original Orishas that were created by the almighty creator god Oludumare. It is said that the male Orishas tried to create Earth without the female influence. Oshun was the only Orisha that was able to revive Earth and bring it to life. Oshun is one of the wives of Shango, who we'll get into next, and Shango actually challenged the other Orishas and made them respect his wife. Next up, we have the African god Shango, who is the god of thunder and is somewhat of an equivalent to the Greek god Zeus. Shango was a king upon earth who was regal and generous and also a master of magic. It is said that Shango was invincible in battle. No one could defeat him, and that the power eventually got to his head. He ended up challenging his own brother and killing him in battle. Shango was also faced by many jealous foes, and his subjects rose against him. To flee from persecution and from what he had done, he ventured into the jungle and hung himself. Followers or children of Shango chant the saying, "Shango does not hang," because they don't believe that someone with so much power and strength would have the audacity to kill themselves. Now, as with all of the mythologies of, these gods and goddesses, there is a lesson to be learned in their birth stories, right? After Shango hung himself, it is said that he ascended to the realms of the spirits, right? To the realms of the invisibles. And what we can gain from this story is the symbol of amassing too much power and not sharing that wealth enough with, the people around you, or that, having so much wealth and power eventually leads one to seek higher spiritual wisdom. So either one of those variations could be a lesson to be gained from Shango's ascension story. Shango is associated with the colors red and white, and the red cloth with white squares, as well as the double axe, as well as objects struck by lightning. Offerings to Shango also include amala, which is a type of African stew, as well as the bata drum. Shango's veve is represented by this symbol, and his day of worship is on Thursday and represents the 8th Sephiroth on the Tree of Life, called Hod. And lastly, we have Oya, who is the Orisha of lightning and rainstorms, the winds and change. Oya is also the queen of the dead, as well as the dark matter of the universe. That is how she has appeared to me personally in working with her energy. Oya also shares similarities with the Orisha Manman Brigitte, the Saint Bridget. Oya is also Shango's counterpart, as well as his wife. In Oya's story of becoming Oya, there's a famous story of Oya and Shango's love. I've got some mythological tea for you right now. So, Oya is said to be married to Oggun and left Oggun for Shango because Oggun would not allow her to go into battle with him and was very controlling. It is said that Shango seduced Oya with his sister's love oil, Oshun. He put on her love oil and rode to Oya in this flashy manner atop a horse with like red powder in his hair. And once he got there, in order to win her over, Oya challenged him to a duel, transformed into a tornado, and defeated him. And Shango had never been defeated in battle, right? He was Shango the Invincible. And he promised to always, fight alongside her in battle, and the rest is history. And Oya generally is a symbol of like female empowerment. Oya is associated with the number 9, as well as the Sephiroth Bina, which is number 3, along the Tree of Life. And this symbol here, Oya's day of worship is typically on Wednesday, and some offerings to Oya include eggplant, red wine, witch hazel, vervain, camphor, as well as black beans. She also likes plums and papaya, and her colors include red, purple, burgundy, and black. The reason Oya was associated with the number 9 is because she gave birth to 9 stillborn children. Not to say that if you are a child of Oya that, you are not fertile. You may find patronage in her based on that story, perhaps. And like I said in the beginning of this video, if you feel connected to a specific deity, I would highly, highly, highly recommend reading more of their stories, doing more research. I will link my favorite texts on the Orishas in the bio, as well as my personal story of how I connected with the Orishas, called African Spirituality, Connecting with the Orishas / Lwa. And I hope that you have discovered once again your connection to an Orisha. Please let me know which Orisha resonates with you in the comments below. I need to hear it. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will see you next Tuesday for a brand new video on some outlandish spiritual topic. I love you so much, and I will see you next week.